They detained a black soldier in uniform. What he did next left them speechless. It was just past 9 a.m. when Sergeant Malcolm Rivers pulled into the gas station just off the I-85 in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He was still in uniform, deep green fatigues neatly pressed, nameplate gleaming under the morning sun, boots laced tight. His cap sat squarely on his head, and a duffel bag was slung over his shoulder. He had just finished a 3-week deployment support mission at Fort Liberty, and all he wanted now was a coffee, a moment to breathe, and a quiet drive home to Durham. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for a black and white police cruiser parked off to the side, its windows tinted. Malcolm barely noticed. He was tired, focused on getting caffeine into his system before the next stretch of road. He stepped into the small convenience store. The chime above the door jingled, and he offered a polite nod to the cashier. A few customers were inside, and one of them, a middle-aged white man in jeans and a hunting cap, gave Malcolm a look that lingered just a second too long. Malcolm didn't flinch. He was used to it. He grabbed a coffee and a sandwich, paid with a smile, and walked back out into the thick August heat. He had just unlocked his car when the flash of red and blue lights snapped him into alertness. The cruiser had moved, and now it blocked him in. 2 officers emerged, both white, both with their hands hovering near their hips. One barked through his megaphone. "Sir, step away from the vehicle. Hands where we can see them." Malcolm blinked, stunned. He slowly placed his coffee on the roof of the car and raised his hands. "Officers, is there a problem?" he asked, his voice even, trained, decades of military discipline kicking in. He didn't move. The second officer, younger, approached with caution. "We got a call about a suspicious person loitering and possibly casing vehicles. Do you have ID?" "I'm a soldier," Malcolm said calmly, gesturing with his chin toward the badge on his chest. "Just came back from Fort Liberty. I was grabbing coffee." Neither officer looked at the nameplate. Neither saluted. They didn't even acknowledge the uniform. "Uniform or not," the older officer replied, "we need to verify that you're not stealing a car." The younger one added, "Do you own this vehicle?" Malcolm's jaw clenched. His voice was still calm, but tighter now. "Yes. My registration is in the glove compartment. I can show you slowly." But they weren't listening. To them, he wasn't Sergeant Malcolm Rivers. He was a suspect. A uniformed black man with a duffel bag near a car too new, in a town too southern. And in that moment, they made a mistake they would come to regret. The older officer, badge reading W. Dalton, stepped forward, one hand on his belt, the other hovering too close to his holster. The younger one, R. Jennings, circled behind Malcolm like a predator testing boundaries. "Hands on the vehicle," Dalton ordered, voice sharp, ignoring the calm in Malcolm's tone, the calm in his body. "Now." Malcolm hesitated, then slowly placed his palms flat against the car's hood. The metal was hot beneath his skin. "Officer," he said, careful, clipped, "I'm an active duty U.S. Army sergeant. My ID is inside my wallet. Back left pocket." "Not until we say so," Jennings snapped, pulling a pair of gloves from his back pocket. "You're acting real nervous." Malcolm exhaled, long, steady, but inside, a slow burn was rising. It wasn't just that they didn't believe him. It was that they didn't even look. Not at the stripes on his sleeve. Not at the name on his chest. Not at the U.S. Army patch that should have, at the very least, made them pause. To them, the uniform meant nothing. Jennings patted him down roughly, pushing against the seams of Malcolm's uniform, his voice mechanical. "Anything sharp that's gonna poke me?" "No, sir," Malcolm answered, keeping his gaze forward, his fingers gripping the edges of the hood now slick with heat and rising tension. Dalton, meanwhile, popped the door open, reaching inside the vehicle without permission. "Hey," Malcolm said sharply, unable to hide the edge this time. "You don't have consent to search my car." "You're not in a position to make demands," Dalton replied. "Suspicious behavior gives us probable cause." A few people had started gathering near the gas pumps, whispering, watching, recording. Jennings yanked the wallet from Malcolm's pocket and flipped it open. He froze. The ID stared back at him. Department of Defense credentials. Active duty. Sergeant First Class. His eyes darted to the uniform, then to the boots. Then, finally, to Malcolm's face. His lips parted slightly, but he said nothing. Dalton looked over. What's the holdup? Jennings didn't answer right away, because in that moment, something shifted. The story they were writing, the one where Malcolm was just another criminal, was crumbling, and reality was stepping in. With rank, with law, with a voice they weren't ready to hear. Jennings stood frozen, wallet still open in his gloved hand. The ID inside glared back like a mirror, showing not only Malcolm's face, but the reflection of everything they'd refused to see. Sergeant First Class Malcolm Rivers, Jennings muttered under his breath, but loud enough for Dalton to hear. Dalton's jaw ticked. He snatched the ID from Jennings, scanned it quickly, and looked up at Malcolm, who was still standing by the hood, heat rising from the engine and the moment. Still doesn't mean you're not up to something, Dalton said gruffly, but the bite in his voice had softened. Just a bit. The kind of backpedal that tried not to look like retreat. Malcolm turned around slowly, eyes locked on Dalton's. You see the uniform now? He asked, voice low. Or did the badge make me invisible? Dalton shifted uncomfortably, trying to recover control of a situation that was slipping from his grip. We got a report. We were following protocol. Malcolm stepped forward once, controlled but unflinching. You searched my car. You put your hands on me. You treated me like a suspect before you asked a single question. That's not protocol. That's prejudice wrapped in procedure. The crowd was larger now. Phones up. Eyewitnesses. Accountability. Jennings' hand dropped to his side, guilt sinking in like rain into concrete. Malcolm took his ID back, slipping it into his pocket with deliberate calm. You didn't even ask where I serve, he added, or why I'm wearing this. You didn't salute. You didn't hesitate. Just judgment. Dalton started to speak, but Malcolm raised a hand, not in anger, but in command. I'm not done. His voice was steady, strong, the kind of voice that filled briefing rooms before missions, the kind that made men listen. And in that moment, the roles had reversed. Malcolm wasn't on the defensive anymore. He was leading. The air was thick now, not just from the southern heat, but from the shame Dalton and Jennings couldn't wipe off their faces. The onlookers had gone quiet, like they knew something meaningful was unfolding. Malcolm adjusted his duffel on his shoulder and let his gaze sweep over both officers. You know, he began, his voice calm but edged with steel, I've spent 12 years in the Army, led missions overseas, buried friends who wore this same uniform, took an oath to defend this country, including the rights you're supposed to protect. Dalton's hands twitched slightly. Malcolm took another step toward them. I've been in villages where I didn't speak the language, where I carried a weapon through hostile ground, and even there, I treated people with more dignity than you gave me in my own country. Jennings looked away, swallowing hard. Malcolm turned slightly, speaking now to the crowd as much as to the men in front of him. This is what it means to wear this uniform? To fight for a country that looks at your skin before it sees your service? No one answered. The silence was deafening. He pointed to the flag patch on his arm. This doesn't protect me when I take off the uniform. To you, I'm just another black man near a nice car. That's all it took. The older man with the hunting cap, the one who had watched Malcolm in the store earlier, suddenly lowered his eyes. Others followed. There was no excuse. Just a reckoning. Malcolm's voice dropped to a near whisper. I took orders from generals with more power than both of you combined. But they never treated me with the disrespect I got in 10 minutes outside this gas station. He looked back at the officers. Now you tell me, what gives you the right? Dalton didn't answer, because there wasn't one. Dalton's eyes darted toward the watching crowd. Phones still recording, witnesses frozen in place. Jennings shifted his weight like he wanted to disappear. But Malcolm? He stood tall, unshaken. That's when he pulled out his phone. I'm done speaking, he said flatly. Now I'm reporting. Dalton stepped forward, voice rising with defensive urgency. Sir, let's not escalate things. Malcolm looked at him, sharp, silent. I didn't escalate. You did. He tapped the number, hit speaker, and held the phone up for everyone to hear. Fort Liberty, Provost Marshal's office. came the voice on the other end. Yes, Malcolm said clearly. This is Sergeant First Class Malcolm Rivers. I've just been unlawfully detained and harassed by 2 local officers while in uniform. I need to report an incident of racial profiling and potential civil rights violation. I'm requesting a military police liaison on site. Location is, he glanced at the gas station sign, exit 61, off I-85. Mobile station. Dalton's color drained. Jennings visibly paled. I'll dispatch a team immediately, Sergeant Rivers. The voice replied, sharp and professional. Please remain on scene. Are you safe at this time? Malcolm glanced at the officers, who now looked as if they'd stepped onto thin ice. I am now. Understood. Help is en route. He ended the call. The weight of the moment shifted. Now the spotlight was fully on the officers, no longer the enforcers, but the accused. Jennings opened his mouth, then closed it again. Dalton tried to recover. Look, this was a misunderstanding. It didn't need to go that far. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. Didn't need to? You had your hand on your weapon before you had your facts. And then, for the first time since it all began, Malcolm smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that comes just before accountability lands like a gavel. You thought you had power. He nodded slowly. Now you're about to find out what real rank looks like. 20 minutes later, 2 military police vehicles pulled into the gas station, lights flashing, not with panic, but with precision. They parked with quiet efficiency, doors opening in unison. The MPs moved quickly, calmly, stepping into the tension like they were trained for it, because they were. The lead MP was a black woman, Staff Sergeant Maya Torres. Her posture was impeccable, her expression unreadable. She scanned the scene, assessed Malcolm, then the 2 local officers. Sergeant Rivers, she said, saluting crisply. Malcolm returned it with quiet dignity. Please brief us, she said, pulling out a notebook and body cam already recording. Malcolm recounted everything. His arrival, the officer's approach, the accusations, the rough search, the failure to verify his ID, the disregard for his uniform. His tone was calm, measured, exact. Dalton tried to interject. Ma'am, if I may. You may not, Torres replied without looking at him. You will have a chance to give your statement after Sergeant Rivers finishes his. The shift was total. Dalton looked like someone had snatched the script from his hands. Once Malcolm finished, Torres turned to the officers. Both of you will remain on site for the duration of this investigation. Your body cam footage will be requested. If it has been turned off at any point, that will be noted. Jennings looked like he wanted to melt into the pavement. Dalton's hands clenched at his sides. This is unnecessary. Torres turned, slow and deliberate. So is harassing a uniformed soldier at a gas station. But here we are. She nodded to another MP. Secure the scene. Notify Fayetteville PD's internal affairs. And get me the store's surveillance footage. Yes, Staff Sergeant. The crowd, still gathered but quieter now, watched something rare, 2 local officers being held accountable in real time. And Malcolm? He just stood there, still in uniform, now surrounded by people who saw him clearly. Not as a threat, not as a suspect, but as what he'd been all along. A soldier. The crowd had begun to thin, some satisfied, others stunned. But a few remained, watching history write itself in real time. Jennings stepped forward hesitantly, his voice low. Sergeant Rivers. I didn't know. I didn't mean for it to go that way. Malcolm didn't move. Didn't know what? That I was a soldier? Or that I was a person? Jennings' mouth opened, but no words followed. His eyes dropped to the asphalt. I didn't expect you to be military. And if I wasn't? Malcolm asked. His tone wasn't cruel, but it cut. If I was just a black man in a hoodie instead of a uniform, would I be cuffed by now? Jennings looked like he wanted to vanish. But Dalton was still fuming, arms crossed, jaw set. Staff Sergeant Torres stepped in. Officers, until internal affairs arrives, you are to remain here. You are not under arrest, yet, but you are under investigation. Your conduct today may result in formal charges. Dalton snapped. We were doing our jobs. No, Torres said evenly. You were enforcing your bias, not the law. Her voice dropped just slightly. And you did it to a man who outranks both of you in more ways than one. Jennings nodded slightly, the shame now fully rooted. Dalton didn't. He was still searching for control, for justification. But the usual escape routes, authority, intimidation, silence, were gone, replaced by cameras. And consequences. Malcolm looked directly at him. I don't want an apology. I want you to understand that what you did could have gotten someone killed. Not today, but next time. Because there will be a next time if nothing changes. Dalton stared at him, but he didn't speak. Not because he didn't have words, but because none of them could undo what had already been done. By the time Fayetteville PD's Internal Affairs Unit arrived, the gas station had returned to a quiet hum. Cars pulling in and out, the everyday buzz returning. But beneath that surface, something deeper was still rumbling. Dalton and Jennings stood apart now, no longer postured with the same unity. Dalton's defiance had curdled into a rigid silence. Jennings? He looked tired, young, like he'd aged in an hour. The IA officer, a stern Latina captain named Alvarez, approached with a clipboard and bodycam flashing. She addressed Torres and Malcolm first, then turned to the officers. I need to speak to both of you separately. This is a formal investigation. Anything you say from this point on will be included in the report. Malcolm stepped aside, giving them space, but he stayed close. This wasn't over. Not yet. Torres walked up beside him. You handled that with more composure than most would have, she said. Malcolm didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed on Dalton and Jennings. I've seen more chaos in Kandahar than most people can imagine, he finally said. But nothing makes you feel more invisible than being disrespected in your own country, wearing the uniform of the same flag they claim to serve. Torres nodded. She understood. He added, quieter now. They didn't see a soldier. They saw a silhouette, a threat, until the ID made me real. Torres exhaled. I wish I could say this was rare. Malcolm shook his head. It's not. It's just recorded more now. From across the lot, a young woman, early 20s, hoodie, phone still in hand, walked toward Malcolm. Her eyes were wide, uncertain. Sergeant? She asked. He turned. I saw everything. I recorded it. If you need a copy for the report. Malcolm smiled, this time genuinely. Thank you. That means a lot. She hesitated. My brother's in the Navy. What happened to you? That's why he's afraid to come home sometimes. Malcolm's chest tightened. He nodded. Tell him he's not alone. She handed over her info and walked away, shoulders squared a little higher than before. The ripple had already started. The report was filed that same day. By sundown, Malcolm's commanding officer had called him personally, not out of protocol, but respect. We've got your back, Sergeant Rivers, Colonel Martin said over the line. This isn't just about you. It's about every soldier who's ever been profiled in uniform or out. By morning, the video had gone viral. The footage from bystanders, Malcolm's calm voice, the officer's aggression, the arrival of MPs, was edited into a powerful 3-minute clip that spread like wildfire. Headlines followed. Black soldier detained by police while in uniform. Sergeant's grace under fire highlights deep flaws in policing. The comments were a firestorm, some praising Malcolm's restraint, others asking why it had to happen in the first place. Veterans from every branch spoke out online. Some shared their own stories. Others demanded reform. Jennings' face was blurred in most versions of the video. Dalton's wasn't. Within 48 hours, both officers had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The department issued a lukewarm statement about retraining and reviewing procedures, but the community wasn't having it. A rally formed outside the precinct. Not violent, not angry, just people holding up photos of family members in uniform. Signs that read, respect all who serve, not just when it's convenient. Malcolm, meanwhile, stayed quiet. No interviews, no press. He wasn't chasing cameras. He was waiting for justice, not attention. But behind the scenes, something else was moving. A military liaison had reached out to the city council. A local senator had seen the footage and requested a hearing. And Malcolm? He'd received an invitation to speak at West Point to incoming cadets about leadership, about restraint. and about what happens when the country you serve forgets to serve you back. The West Point auditorium was quiet as the cadets filed in, their footsteps crisp against the polished floor. Rows of sharp uniforms, pressed and poised, future officers ready to absorb wisdom, ready to lead. None of them spoke as Malcolm stepped onto the stage. He wore his dress uniform this time. Every ribbon earned, every stripe a chapter. But it wasn't the medals that held their attention. It was the weight in his eyes, the lived experience. He stood at the podium, took a breath, and began. I'm Sergeant First Class Malcolm Rivers. 12 years Army. 3 tours. And a few days ago, I was treated like a criminal in the country I fight to defend. No dramatics. No embellishment. Just truth. He told them the story, not as a soldier seeking sympathy, but as a man demanding clarity. He painted the picture of that morning with precision, the heat off the hood, the weight of judgment, the absence of humanity. And then he paused. Let silence say what words couldn't. You will lead people who don't look like you, he said, scanning the room. People who come from places you've never been. Some will serve quietly, carry burdens you'll never see. And some, like me, will be reminded that uniform or not, we don't all come home to the same country. A few cadets shifted uncomfortably. He let them. That discomfort you feel right now, that's the edge where change begins. One hand went up. A cadet with a shaved head and nervous eyes. Sergeant Rivers, sir, how did you stay calm? I don't think I could have. Malcolm smiled faintly. It wasn't calm. It was control. And control is what leadership demands when the world loses its grip. There was a quiet ripple of understanding. He ended with this. If you ever find yourself in a position to speak up for someone who's being dismissed, disrespected, or unseen, do it. Because silence makes you complicit. And silence doesn't wear a uniform, but it leaves scars just the same. When he stepped down, the cadets stood. Not because they were told to, but because they saw him. Truly. And for the first time in a long time, Malcolm felt seen, not just as a soldier, but as a man. 2 weeks later, Malcolm found himself in a very different room. A city council hearing packed wall to wall. News cameras lined the back, and the buzz of anticipation hung heavy in the air. The topic, community trust in law enforcement. At the front sat Dalton and Jennings, no longer in uniform, no longer in control. Their attorneys sat beside them, faces tight with damage control. Malcolm entered quietly, but when his name was called, he walked forward with the same posture he'd carried through combat zones, steady, centered, unshaken. Sergeant First Class Malcolm Rivers, he said into the microphone. U.S. Army. He took a breath and began. I didn't come here to attack these men, he said. I came to ask a question. How many more people have to prove they're good enough just to be treated like human beings? A murmur moved through the room. I was in uniform, with ID, with a calm voice. And still, I was approached like a suspect, because somewhere in the system, skin color still carries more weight than rank. He turned to Dalton and Jennings. I don't want your careers ruined. I want your eyes opened. I want you to feel the weight of what almost happened. Not just to me, but to every black man who doesn't have a badge, or a camera, or a uniform to shield them. Dalton looked away. Jennings didn't. Malcolm turned back to the council. Accountability isn't punishment. It's correction. It's the only way systems grow. If nothing changes after this, if they go back to patrol tomorrow with nothing learned, then everything I endured meant nothing. The room was silent. One council member leaned forward. Sergeant Rivers, what do you want us to do? Malcolm's answer was simple. Start with the truth. Admit this is a pattern, not a fluke. And then train them. Retrain the whole damn system. Because this isn't just about 2 officers. He paused. It's about all of us. 3 months passed. Dalton and Jennings were officially suspended without pay, ordered to complete extensive anti-bias training, community service, and appear before a civilian review board. It wasn't jail, but it was accountability, a crack in a wall that rarely breaks. The Fayetteville Police Department implemented new policies, mandatory racial bias training, civilian oversight expanded, patrol rotations diversified. None of it was perfect, but it was more than before. Malcolm didn't ask for recognition, but it found him anyway. At a local Veterans Day event, Malcolm was invited to speak. He almost said no. He didn't do what he did for applause. But he went, quietly, wearing his dress blues, like armor and memory stitched together. He stood in front of a crowd at the town square, flags fluttering, children holding signs, veterans standing at attention. And in the front row, sitting beside a councilwoman, was Officer Jennings. Not in uniform, not out of obligation, but by choice. When Malcolm finished speaking, the applause was warm but restrained, out of reverence, not performance. Then something happened that stopped everything. Jennings stood and saluted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't staged. Just one man, offering the respect he'd failed to give when it mattered most. Malcolm didn't return the salute. Not right away. He walked over slowly, the crowd parting in silence. They stood face to face. "I don't know if it's enough," Jennings said quietly, "but I'm trying." Malcolm studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded once and returned the salute, crisp and deliberate. The kind you give to someone who's finally learning what respect really means. The moment didn't fix everything. It wasn't meant to, but it meant something. Because sometimes, change doesn't start with the law. It starts with a lesson and a long overdue look in the mirror. Thank you for watching. Subscribe me and hit the notification bell to not miss new stories. Bye.